Welcome to Ignatius Press, Off the Shelf. And we are discussing Chesterton's Everlasting Man, which you can't really tell from my cover because it's the cover's been lost.
Hold up my cover.
But she will show you her cover. And we finished the first part of this book called On the Creature Called Man, where Chesterton shows that if you look at nature, creation, you can't imagine it automatically, evolutionarily ending up in someone like man. That man stands out, men and women and children stand out as something of a different quality, different degree, different kind, not just different degree. Now we go to part two on the man called Christ, where he does something parallel. He's looking at history and shows if you look at the history of mankind and try and treat Jesus Christ as just another member of that species, another man, it won't work. There's something that makes him stand out. He's fully man, but he's more than fully man. And the second part of the book will actually be the kind of conclusion of fulfillment or the bringing together all the threads that come in the first part of the book. And of course, this is Joseph. You're supposed to be leading this, but I'm as usual.
I'd like
pulling
to
the blanket on my side. Go ahead.
I'd like to add just a tiny thing that not only does Jesus stand out as a unique man, he stands out as a unique God. You can't even put him in the evolution of religion, if you want to call it that, right, Joseph? I mean, his story just doesn't fit any other pattern, and he'll get into that. But
I do
take
love
it
the way
away.
that, it shows his literary quality here, because the analogy between the two parts of the book, part one on the creature called man, part two on the man called Christ, and then part one, chapter one, the man in the cave, and then part two, chapter one, the God in the cave. So these wonderful parallels you draw between the caveman on the one hand, and then the God, Jesus Christ, who's born in the cave of Bethlehem. It's beautiful.
And I think that's one of Chesterton's great qualities, not just the wit and the humor and the alliteration, the paradox, all that's there, but he sees things in kind of a structural way. I mean, he can look at all of history and pull out these elements which really are the outline, so to speak, of history, what the real outline of it, not the positivistic outline, not the historical critical outline, but the kind of the realistic outline. I asked myself the question, and I asked you, how much should we quote in these chapters? Because this is sort of a highly dense concentration of some of Chesterton's most memorable expressions.
And it's so beautiful. It's just so it's so beautiful, this first chapter in this second part, the God in the cave. My husband used to read this every Christmas time because it's so moving, and you could just read the whole thing, which is what he would do, read it out loud.
That's true. And when I was in France for the first time studying, my first Christmas, when I just read this, I think I reread it, I sent a Christmas card, which was basically it was these 2 pages printed on the card.
Well, and he goes right to Christmas, doesn't he, in explaining that any child who's experienced a Christmas is imprinted with this for life, that it actually changes the child. And that's something that I never thought of before, just totally taking for granted, being raised in a Christian society of sorts. I wasn't raised in a religious home, but yet we had a creche. These I watched Charlie Brown Christmas. That was the closest I got to church. And these things fixed something in me that when I did open myself to Jesus as Lord of my life, that was already all there, even without being raised religiously,
Without going off on a tangent, because obviously we got this to cover, I had a very, very similar experience. It was just, we never went to church, we never prayed, but carol concerts on Christmas morning, the spirit of Christmas in some sense. I mean, it just transcended whatever sort of unbelief you had or disbelief you had with something quite clearly magical and better. You
Yes.
know, and there's sort of there's an embryonic desire, even if you're a complete agnostic or atheist. There's a desire is planted there, and that's of course the grace of God.
Yep.
And I think one of Lewis's strategies in writing the Chronicles of Narnia was that in our society, even the Christmas experience is declining and diminishing. And he wanted to create a new mythology, a new set of images so that, you know, oh, Aslan, you know, and they'd figure out when they did see Christ or the God, say, oh my gosh, I've got those images on my mind. So uh,
Hmm.
that was one reason why I believe Lewis was perhaps the greatest Christian apologist of the 20th century, with, of course, Chesterton being up with him there. I just kind of summarized this on my notes here as using Chesterton alliteration, his own. He's expressing the contrast between cosmic creation on the one hand and the little local infancy. You know, that the God of all creation, the infinite, unknowable, ineffable God, the God of cosmic creation, now comes to us as a little child, a little local infancy.
And
Beautiful.
this great line on the bottom of 170, going back to how we just take this image for granted, the man God in the stable, the mother, all these things. And I love this on the bottom of 170. It is no more inevitable to connect God with an infant than to connect gravitation with a kitten. And yet, because of Christmas, we already have this connection, God and the child, in our minds, whether we're Christian or not, or whether we believe or not, it's just there.
Yeah, and there's a three pages further on from that. I'm not stopping us from going back again, but you know, we know this Chesterton sort of paradoxical approach is that you know if you stand on your head, you see things upside down. You actually might be seeing them the right way up because you've been taken for granted and not seeing them at all. And perhaps you know you realise for the first time you're actually not on your head. You're standing the right way up, and you had been standing on your head. So all this, and page 173, the beginning of that bottom chapter there there it is. There is in that alone the touch of revolution, as of the world turned upside down. You know, the incarnation of God changes everything, and if you like, reverses everything because now, you know, God is one of us,
Mhm.
and it revolutionizes the way that we perceive God, we perceive ourselves, we perceive religion, and that in the general sense, it is that beautiful standing on our heads so that we can see things clearly. That's exactly what Jesus Christ in the incarnation does.
And I love this conclusion that he draws from this also on 173 after that. It is profoundly true to say that after that moment, there could be no slaves. Not that there still aren't slaves,
Right.
but that philosophically, there was gonna be a problem with that, whether we admitted that to ourselves or not. Now that God had become man, it made man, it made it clear what human dignity really is.
Yeah, the dignity of the human person makes slavery something which is obscene and absurd, basically.
Yes,
So sooner or
yes,
later, it's going to have to go, right?
yep,
And note how this is, I mean, this is so central, this idea of God becoming man, the infinite God becoming a little child, that Christianity has, and Catholicism has infleshed it, so to speak, in the sign of the cross. It's the name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. That's the Trinity. But the Son is coming down from the Father, you know, descending. And then in the morning at 6 a.m. and at noon and at 6 p.m., the long-standing tradition of the church is to have the Angelus, which ends up, you know, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, you know, from John's Gospel. So yeah, this is the central mystery of Christianity, Trinity and Incarnation.
mhm,
But when Chesterton describes it, it's like a new thing, you know, like you're seeing it for the first time when he
yes,
does this.
mm,
That's his beautiful strength.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm,
Well, okay, speaking personally, that's exactly what he was to me because I was not a Christian. It was reading Chesterton that opened my eyes to all of these mysteries, which are truths. The mysteries, which are truths, right?
Mhm. And then I love the way he goes through the different characters and the Christmas story, the shepherds and the magi. And now back to your point, Father, about the architecture of this thing,
Yeah.
because he had set up the mythology of the ancient world, the philosophy of the ancient world, and now in
And
the
the
Chris
struggle and the demonology of the ancient world.
and the demonology too, and he shows you how all these characters are in the very drama of the birth of Christ, how all this thing has been like set up from the beginning of time to come to this moment. And until I read this in him in this book, I just never put it together like that.
Yeah, and as he says, the shepherds are there, the common people, the people of the myths, the magi are there, the philosophers are there, and then Herod, who's killing the children, which is what the Carthaginians did and the Canaanites did, he's there too.
Yep.
Yeah,
So,
I read a book for Ignatius Press called The Good, the Bad, and the Beautiful, where I looked at basically human history as the three classic understandings of who we are: Homo viator, pilgrim man, a man on the journey; Homo superbus, proud man; and Anthropos, he looks up in wonder. I think we see that. What are the philosophers? What are the wise men? They who look up in wonder, they see the star, they follow the star to Bethlehem. The philosophers, Anthropos. Who are the shepherds? They're the ones the myths, the stories, right? Man on a journey, that our life is a journey, therefore our life is a story. And then you have Homo superbus, Herod, right? The demon worshippers, the proud men, right? That basically don't want the journey, they don't want the wonder, they want basically self empowerment. And so you got, if you like, from the very fabric of the nativity story, you've got those three threads that then play themselves out through all of history.
Yep. Yep.
and another element here we're going to get to, uh, Chesterton sees the symbolism in what is real. We talk about symbols. Sometimes we think, well, symbols aren't real; they're just signs. But no, reality itself can be symbolic.
Yes.
Uh, just like the exodus of the Jews that took place, the Israelites. Uh, but that symbolizes our own exodus, from sin to grace and so on. And so Chesterton, like Benedict XVI after him, sees so much richness in the symbols of our faith. And here he says, well, we have the Christmas, we have a creche, but we forget it's a cave. Why a cave? Because God didn't come down on earth. He went under the earth.
Yeah.
In other words, it's not just creation, but it's below. It's sinful creation, and also it's not just uh, uh, a military advance on the surface. It's undermining, the foundations of paganism by going deeply underneath. Yeah.
Well, it's and as you said, Father, when you made the sign of the cross and you showed this descent
Yes.
of the Son from the Father, and as we know from the creed, the descent into hell, Jesus doesn't just come down to our level, he actually goes underneath to push us up from below, like saving a drowning person. If you can't grab him by the hair and pull him up, you might have to go down below and push him up.
And again, this whole thing, I mean, what's the word substance, right? That which stands under or understands, right?
Yeah.
The God in going under in the cave is showing us the substance of who we are, right? We're much deeper than anything we've ever seen before because he's under it all.
And then this double entendre that this going under also undermines the powers of this world, right? So he's going under to push us up, but when he pushes us up, guess what's going to crack on the surface? The current structure of the world. And so this is why it's a revolution. And this is why the Herods of this world are threatened by it, or the White Witch in Narnia. This is why they're threatened by it, because their reign over us and keeping us slaves is about to be overturned.
Yes. And then I had in my notes, I wanted Joseph to read on page 174 uh, two full paragraphs. Can you do that, Joseph? Starting the new paragraph from
I
one.
can do whatever you'd like me to, Father. It's not a problem. So what? Some So men of the people, and then that paragraph in the following one.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because this is a summary of how, as you said, Vivian, and I said too, that uh, he set this up in the first part with the philosophers and the myth makers and Herod, not Herod, but the demon worshippers, and here he's going to describe how that's been fulfilled. So go ahead, Joseph.
Men of the people, like the shepherds, men of the popular tradition, had everywhere been the makers of the mythologies. It was they who had felt most directly, with least check or chill from philosophy or the corrupt cults of civilization, the need we have already considered. The images that were adventures of the imagination, the mythology that was a sort of search, the tempting and tantalizing hints of something half human in nature, the dumb significance of seasons and special places.
So this is all kind of summary of what paganism,
Mhm,
pagan mythology was doing. Okay,
mhm,
go ahead.
mhm.
They had best understood that the soul of a landscape is a story, and the soul of a story is a personality. But rationalism had already begun to rot away these really irrational, though imaginative treasures of the peasant. Even as systematic slavery had eaten the peasant out of house and home, upon all such peasantries everywhere there was descending a dusk and twilight of disappointment in the hour when these few men discovered what they sought. Everywhere else, Arcadia was fading from the forest. Pan was dead, and the shepherds were scattered like sheep. And though no man knew it, the hour was near which was to end and to fulfill all things. And though no man heard it, there was one far off cry in an unknown tongue upon the heaving wilderness of the mountains. The shepherds had found their shepherd. And the thing they found was of a kind with the things they sought. The populace had been wrong in many things, but they had not been wrong in believing that holy things could have a habitation, and that divinity need not disdain the limits of time and space. And the barbarian who conceived the crudest fancy about the sun being stolen and hidden in a box, or the wildest myth about the god being rescued and his enemy deceived with a stone, was nearer to the secret of the cave and knew more about the crisis of the world than all those in the circles of cities around the Mediterranean who had become content with cold abstractions or cosmopolitan generalizations, than all those who were spinning thinner and thinner threads of thought out of the transcendentalism of Plato or the Orientalism of Pythagoras. The place that the shepherds found was not an academy or an abstract republic. It was not a place of myths allegorized or dissected or explained away. It was a place of dreams come true. Since that hour, no mythologies have been made in the world. Mythology is a search.
Now, I found that beautiful, which is why I wanted you to read it. But would you say, though, Joseph, that no mythologies have been created since?
Well, I know you and I have had sort of, I say, disagreements or discussions about this. I mean, obviously, Tolkien would say that the Lord of the Rings is a mythology. I mean, in one sense, the word myth is just a Greek word for story, and of course, stories are still being told. But now, of course, the Lord of the Rings, as Tolkien says, is a fundamentally religious and Catholic work. So the story is not a search; the story is a revelation of what's been found. So it's not the same sort of myth of the pre-Christian pagans, but we're still telling stories because I think part of who we are as human beings made in the image of God is storytellers.
And also, going back to Father's point about the, um, symbolism that's built into the world, so that, um, we have experiences all the time of real objects and real events, and we see this deeper meaning behind it. And that's not because, like the psychologist would say, we're just projecting our feelings onto the object or projecting making meaning for ourselves. No, we have these moments where the veil is lifted for a moment and we see that the thing means something more than what it is. And it's happening to me or it's there in the room or whatever. We have these aha moments, right? And so that's why stories are also still so important. Not as you say, Joseph, for a search for things that are already found, but as an uncovering of the found truth that's there before our eyes, and sometimes it takes a story to reveal it, you know?
Yeah, as
It's like
Tolkien says in his essay on Forest's fairy stories, that they offer recovery, by which he means
yeah,
recovering a clear view, because
yes,
we get fogged over and we're not the things that are really, really glorious and miraculous become trite and
yes,
therefore trivial, and we don't take them seriously. So then we see them in a new light through the presentation of the story. So the ring as being a synonym for sin, and all of a sudden, you talk about, well, you've got to Gollemize yourself if you're in mortal sin, and these things we're taking for granted are sort of come alive again to us.
right.
And there's a book by the wonderful, uh, now deceased Thomas Howard called Chance or the Dance,
Yes.
where he contrasts the ancient and medieval wisdom of symbolism of all reality with the Enlightenment, which he sometimes would call the Endarkenment, uh, where the scientific method began to analyze things, take them apart, and look at the parts by themselves, not as part of a whole. And so he summed it up by saying uh, the result of the scientific empirical method has been that nothing means anything. That is, nothing symbolizes anything. Oh, this is just a part of something. So nothing means anything. Whereas previously, everything means something. As
Mhm.
Yeah,
all of reality is connected, it points to other things beyond it. So I mean, I probably recommended it before, but put that on your list, folks. If you haven't read that book, Chance of the Dance by Thomas Howard, that's a little classic of the 20th century, I would
it
Mhm.
say.
is.
It is.
Joseph, I now you read the two paragraphs about how mythology finds its fulfillment because it was a search and now it has found something. On page 176, there's two paragraphs there, um, maybe three. Starting with the sentence about a third of the known mythology and many sins. Dot dot dot.
Mhm.
Would you read
Hmm.
that for a couple more? For a couple that plus the next two paragraphs.
I'll read until you stop me. How about that? Mythology had many sins. It had not been wrong in being as carnal as the Incarnation. With something of the ancient voice that was supposed to have rung through the groves, it could cry again, "We have seen, he hath seen us, a visible God." So the ancient shepherds might have danced, and their feet had been beautiful upon the mountains, rejoicing over the philosophers. But the philosophers had also heard. It is still a strange story, though an old one, how they came out of Orient lands, crowned with the majesty of kings, and clothed with something of the mystery of magicians. That truth, that is tradition, has wisely remembered them almost as unknown quantities, as mysterious as their mysterious and melodious names, Melchior, Caspar, Balthazar. But there came with them all that world of wisdom that had watched the stars in Chaldea and the sun in Persia, and we shall not be wrong if we see in them the same curiosity that moves all the sages. They would stand for the same human ideal if their names had really been Confucius or Pythagoras or Plato. They were those who sought not tales, but the truth of things. And since their thirst for truth was itself a thirst for God, they also have had their reward. But even in order to understand that reward, we must understand that for philosophy, as much as mythology, that reward was the completion of the incomplete. Such learned men would doubtless have come, as these learned men did come, to find themselves confirmed in much that was true in their own traditions and right in their own reasoning. Confucius would have found a new foundation for the family in the very reversal of the Holy Family. Buddha would have looked upon a new renunciation of stars rather than jewels and divinity than royalty. These learned men would still have the right to say, or rather a new right to say, that there was truth in their old teaching. But after all these learned men would have come to learn, they would have come to complete their conceptions with something they had not yet conceived, even to balance their imperfect universe with something they might once have contradicted. Buddha would have come from his impersonal paradise to worship a person. Confucius would have come from his temples of ancestor worship to worship a child.
And then I'll just conclude with a few sentences after that. We must grasp from the first this character in the new cosmos that was larger than the old cosmos. In that sense, Christendom is larger than creation, as creation had been before Christ. It included things that had not been there. It also included things that had been there. So this beautiful
Yeah,
summary, sentences he
it's
makes of
yeah,
how he sees the value of those who told the myths. He sees the value of those who sought the truth, but he also sees the incompleteness
Mhm.
and how beautiful this is in the drama, which God is the director, we're the actors, in which it comes to this beautiful crescendo, if you will, in the birth of Christ.
And this
yeah,
crescendo is not something that simply logically follows upon what had come before. Nobody would have anticipated the
no,
Christmas story, either the mythology makers or the philosophers. It was this completely surprising and wonderful revelation that they would not have invented or
right,
discovered without it happening before their eyes, you know? That's what's
yeah,
amazing about it.
yeah, and Chester is so rich in the way that he unpacks it as well. I mean, I know that Americans are not particularly keen on Christmas pudding or fruitcake, but to me, it's rich like a Christmas pudding. That every bite, there's so much in it. You don't actually need that many bites at a time because you get full very quickly. And this is the problem we're sort of facing here with something as dense and as rich in every bite or every page as this book.
Joseph, I make an English Christmas pudding every Christmas. And I started making them, because for one thing, I've got 2 sons, and every boy is a pyromaniac at heart, and there's nothing better than when I flame this thing, right, and the
Yeah,
blue flame goes up in the dark room,
yeah.
you know?
Douse it with brandy and set it alight. That's
Oh,
part of the
yeah, yeah,
whole.
yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
great. So I've been doing that every year since the children were little, and, but yes,
You're
it's very
you're a
rich.
ci- you're Vivian. You're a civilized gal,
Yeah. Is that gal?
a gal. Yeah,
A gal.
GAL. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep.
I think we're getting close to the end of our time here, but we talked about mythology and philosophy, but he ends up the chapter also by saying that the page 180 and bottom of that old paragraph there, the demons also in that first festival of Christmas found feasted after their own fashion. That was Herod.
Yes.
Uh, and on page 182, new paragraph, Herod had his place, therefore, in the miracle play of Bethlehem, because he is the menace to the church militant, and he shows it from his first as under persecution, fighting for his life.
Mhm.
And then uh, he sums it up, uh, bottom of page 182. The purpose here is this, in this place is really to sum up the combination of ideas that make up the Christian and Catholic idea, and to note that all of them are already crystallized in the first Christian story. A couple of lines down. The first is the human instinct for a heaven that should be as literal and almost as local as a home, so mythology. About 10 lines down. The second element is a philosophy larger than other philosophies. And the third point at the bottom is this, that while it is local enough for poetry and larger than any other philosophy, it is also a challenge and a fight. Top of page 184. This is the Trinity of truths, symbolized here by the three types in the old Christian story: the shepherds and the kings, and that other king who warred upon the children.
Mhm.
So again, sometimes you read Chesterton and think he's rambling, Well, he does ramble like I do, except better because he's more intelligent and more funny. But he always is got a structure. He's always got some kind of a synthesis he's making.
Mhm.
Uh,
Mhm.
so I think that's good. So we call it for a episode.
Mhm. Yeah.
Thanks everyone. We'll see you next week. Oh, before I go, we're gonna pretty soon be we're discussing our next book by Gertrude von Fort, never before translated until recently by us. The Wedding of Magdeburg. It's a novel. It's a phenomenal novel. Want to say just a quick word about that,
Well,
David?
to our point about the meaning of things already being there, the Wedding of Magdeburg is the name of a battle during the 30 Years' War, and Gertrude von Lefort is showing us the deeper meaning of the individuals, the historic individuals, and this historic event that are already there. She's not projecting the meaning; the meaning is already there, and she helps us to see it. It's amazing. So I'll just leave it with that.
Very good. Thanks, everyone. God bless you. See you later.